You know, every revolution has its symbols, those heroic images and songs that just capture a nation's imagination. But sometimes those really powerful symbols hide a much more complex and, frankly, a way more interesting truth. Today, we're going to go beyond the legend to uncover the real story of the women who were the invisible engine of the Mexican Revolution. If you know the music of the Mexican Revolution, you definitely know this song, La Adelita. It created this beautiful, romantic vision of the female revolutionary, right? Brave, loyal, loved by all the troops. She basically became the poster child for all the women who took part in the war. Because what if the reality was less about being a romantic muse and way more about being a logistical genius, a frontline warrior, and a master spy? The real story of these women is so much bigger, so much more incredible than a single ballad. All right, so let's start by digging into the legend itself. Now, this whole Adelita thing wasn't just made up out of thin air. It was actually inspired by a real person, Adela Velarda Perez. She was a teenager from a well-off family who, back in 1915, decided to join the Mexican White Cross as a nurse. She was determined to be on the front lines. And her story, along with the song it inspired, just blew up. It became a national myth. That image of the woman with the cross bandoliers and a rifle, totally iconic. But the problem is, this powerful symbol ended up overshadowing the diverse and often brutal realities of the thousands of women who made the war possible in the first place. And that brings us to the real heart of the matter, the reality of the Soldadera. See, beyond the myth of Adelita, there was this crucial role. And Soldadera wasn't just a cool nickname, it was a job description. It was the job of being the absolute operational backbone of the revolutionary armies. The name itself tells you everything you need to know. It comes from the word soldada, which was a soldier's pay. The male soldiers would literally hand over their wages to these women, and in return, the women became their entire support system. We're talking procuring food, cooking, cleaning, pretty much keeping them alive to fight another day. This table just lays it all out. On one hand, you had the official federal army. They had a formal, state-funded supply chain that was super rigid and failed all the time. But the revolutionary armies, their supply chain was human. It was the Soldaderas. They weren't just trailing behind the army, they were the logistics department. And that's what made the rebellion so flexible, so resilient, and ultimately able to survive. And their workload was just immense. I mean, it was a grueling 24/7 job. They were out foraging for food in harsh deserts, nursing the wounded with whatever they had, setting up camp every single night, cleaning weapons, even picking through battlefields for supplies. And some took on even crazier risks, like smuggling ammo from the US by hiding hundreds of rounds under their skirts, using the fact that the border guards just saw them as harmless women to get past. Which leads us to where this story gets even more incredible. Because their roles went way beyond just keeping the camp running. A lot of these women used their unique position to become spies, frontline fighters, and, get this, even commanders who led men into battle. Just think about it for a second. Who would a federal officer completely ignore in his own camp? The women selling food or washing clothes, right? The Soldaderas used this social invisibility as a weapon. They would slip right into enemy camps, listen to conversations, and gather mission-critical intel on troop movements and morale, all while being totally overlooked. And then there were the women who refused to be invisible at all. They were not content with support roles. They demanded rifles, they proved they could fight, and in some absolutely extraordinary cases, they rose to command. And of all these stories, there's maybe none more powerful than that of Petra Herrera. Petra Herrera's story is just unbelievable. To even get a chance to fight, she had to disguise herself as a man, and she went by the name Pedro. Turns out she was an explosives expert and a brilliant strategist. After proving herself in major battles, she finally revealed who she was. And her skill was so undeniable that she kept her command, eventually leading a force of hundreds of men. Her biggest moment came during the Second Battle of Torreon. We have multiple witnesses and even a corrido, a ballad, written about the battle that credit Herrera as the leader who won the city. This wasn't a myth. It was a documented battlefield victory, led by a woman. And yet, after all that, after her proven genius and success on the battlefield, Pancho Villa himself refused to give her official credit or promote her to general. It was just blatant sexism. But her response? She didn't quit. No way. She left Villa and formed her own independent, all-female brigade. And this all leads to the final and honestly the most tragic part of the story. What happened after the revolution was won? After these women had been the army's supply chain, its medical corps, its spy network, and its shock troops, well, the aftermath is heartbreaking. I mean, just look at this injustice. After being the absolute backbone of the war, the Soldaderas were almost completely erased from the official history books. The new government pushed them back into domestic roles, denied them veteran status, and refused them the pensions that the male soldiers got. Their immense contribution was just reduced to a romantic song. And what about the woman who started it all? Adelita Perez, the original Adelita, wasn't officially recognized as a veteran until 1962, merely half a century later. She died in 1971 in abject poverty, a forgotten hero whose symbol had become way more famous than her reality. So, the story of the Soldaderas forces us to ask a really important question, one that's just as relevant today. In any big movement, in any company, in any cause, who are the essential people doing the work that makes everything else possible, but who stay invisible, operating in what you might call the background of obviousness? Look for them, because that's almost always where the real story is.